Hello, everyone, and welcome into Coach Craig's Sports. This is the XFL video for, I should say, this is the XFL DFS video for week number 4. I'm going to be doing the recap of week 3 in here as well. Typically, on a normal week, I do a video on Tuesday, kind of doing a recap plus first look, and then do the XFL DFS picks on Friday. So this week kind of condensed into one video. We didn't have the snap count data from last week's games as quickly as we typically do, where I'm able to do it on Tuesday. So came out last night, was going through, putting that in my spreadsheet that's over on patreon.com/CoachCraigSport. But I'm going to go through my notes from last week, kind of what happened, looking at some target shares, looking at some snap counts for different players. And then we'll go over to my other sheet for the DFS for this week, kind of go over the players that I do like, whether I like to play them in GPP, cash, kind of GPP pay down options, and then go over DraftKings, talk a little bit over there, maybe build it like a cash lineup and like a GPP lineup as well. But without further ado, we'll get started with a recap from last week. So I'm going to start off with the Arlington Renegades once again. So we did see a change at quarterback. Kyle Slaughter was the starting quarterback. He started this game. He had 100% of the pass attempts and 100% of the snaps. So Drew Plitt did not factor in at all. Would assume that's the same case going forward in week 4. They won that game last week against Orlando. It should have been an easy game for them to win, but Kyle Slaughter really wasn't like too great there. He was efficient, didn't really do much otherwise. They only put 10 points up on the board. So this is not a super exciting offense at that still. In terms of the running backs, we knew last week they cut Keith Ford. They brought in Kenneth Farrow. Davion Smith had 77% of the snaps last week. He had 67% of the carries, 18 total carries, and 2 targets out of the backfield for a 9% target share. Adrian Killens saw 30% of snaps. He had 0% of the carries. He didn't have a single carry. Was really just used as a slot wide receiver for the most part in this game. Kind of gadget player like that. He had 1 target for a 4% target share. So still not very involved. Not anybody that we want to target from a DFS perspective at this point in time. Kenneth Farrow, 19% of the snaps and 19% of the carries. He had 5 total carries. Didn't have a single target out of the backfield, but guy that recently joined the team, he was with them early on in camp though too. So was a easy guy to bring back in. He'll kind of take over that Keith Ford role, I would assume, at this point in time. When it comes down to the wide receivers, we saw a little bit of a change last week. Tyler Vaughn saw 60% of the snaps, which was a little bit down for him. Not sure if he kind of got banged up in the game or anything else like that, but I don't see his name on the injury report this week. He's been a pretty cheap play. He had a more efficient game. He had 7 targets for a 30% target share in this game, and he did catch the 1 lone touchdown. So could be a guy to look for going forward for week 4. LaJuan Winningham only played 32% of snaps after seeing an increase the week before. So he's kind of stuck in limbo, 4% target share with only 1 target. Kind of the bigger note in terms of wide receivers here, Brandon Arconato, he played 53% of snaps. He had the 13% target share with 3 targets. Him and Monster were kind of splitting that slot role, but Monster played 0% of offensive snaps last week. He only played on a couple special teams. So it looks like it's Arconato's job in the slot at this point in time. So maybe that's somebody we can consider in future weeks. Jordan Smallwood saw 46% of snaps on the outside, but didn't receive a single target, so he's pretty much useless still. And then Caleb Van Esch, who, it's his first week that he was active with the team, 39% of the snaps. He had 2 targets for a 9% target share. So he could be somebody to look at going forward as kind of a cheap pay down option, but not really too interested in him at this week overall. Sal Cannell played 89% of the snaps. He had a 30% target share with 7 targets. So still pretty much what we've been looking at for this team overall, with Sal Cannell and Tyler Vaughn's leading the way in terms of target share. Davion Smith leading the backfield. The other 2 tight ends, we saw 28% snap share for Sean Byer. And then for, I believe, Nate Becker, 19% target or 19% snap share, and neither one of them received a target. Moving down to the defenders, we still saw a little bit of a quarterback split here. Jordan Ta'amu played 76% of the snaps, and Derek King had 24% of the snaps. We also saw the third quarterback in Eric Dungy see some playing time as well. Didn't ever line up as a traditional quarterback, though. He played a little bit out of the backfield, a little bit in like a tight end / wide receiver role, which was kind of interesting since that was the first game that he was active for. Abram Smith, I'm getting ahead of myself there. So 87% of the pass attempts were for Jordan Ta'amu, and then 13% for Derek King. I think King had 3, and then Ta'amu had like 20. 26% carry share for Jordan Ta'amu in this game. He had 10 total carries. He had a rushing touchdown and only 2 carries in Derek King in this game for him overall. So I believe that was the first game we see more pass attempts than carries for Derek King in general. So that is something to note. Probably going to lean off of some of the Derek King exposure this week, just since Ta'amu was kind of showing around and they've been willing to stick with him throughout this process. For Abram Smith, he saw 69% of snaps, 41% of carries. He had a 17% target share with 4 targets overall. I forgot to write down the number of carries for him and Raquel Armstead at this point in time, but obviously a larger share towards Abram Smith overall. Raquel Armstead, 41% of snaps, 28% of carries, and a 0% target share. He had no targets this week once again. We moved down to the wide receivers once again. So we had Chris Blair, who had 83% of the snaps, leading the way for wide receivers for them once again. 13% target share. He had 3 targets, but he did have a touchdown in this game on a long touchdown pass. So I believe it was a 58-yarder. Was obviously the first time that he really paid off at his price tag. As we've seen this passing game not be too effective overall, mainly been a ground and pound team, but when we get to this week, we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe potentially changing with their tight ends being out. Then we saw Josh Hammond kind of second on the team, 81% of snaps, 22% target share. He had 5 targets out of the slot this past week. And then Lucky Jackson, 81% of snaps. He had a 30% target share, 7 targets on the outside, opposite of Chris Blair. So maybe Lucky Jackson, someone to consider moving forward once again, especially if this gets a little bit more of a pass-happy team. Then the 3 other wide receivers, Josh Malone, 27% of snaps, didn't receive a single target. Jaquez Zard, 21% of snaps, didn't receive a single target either. And then Brandon Smith, who recently signed with the team, former Iowa wide receiver, saw 10% of snaps, only to 7 total snaps, and he didn't receive a single target either. So we'll see if they work him in more in the future, but really just the top 3 guys. Those other 3 guys didn't factor in too much. Eli Wolf, the tight end, 66% of snaps. He had 17% target share. He received 4 targets and a touchdown, I believe, from Derek King. And then Trey Berry had 10% of snaps, but didn't receive a single target at tight end as well. Burley Moore did not play last week due to injury. For the Houston Roughnecks, Brandon Silvers and Cole McDonald kind of split time once again, but, Cole McDonald's just coming in for some run plays, some read options and stuff like that. We saw 17% of the snaps for Cole McDonald, 83% of the snaps for Brandon Silvers. I am missing an S there. Just going to throw that in real quick. 97% of the pass attempts still for Brandon Silvers, only 3% of the pass attempts for Cole McDonald. McDonald just had the 1. Brandon Silvers had 28. I feel like I want to double check this just because I feel like that number is off. I'm not sure I changed that, but we're going to keep talking as I let the page load as well. 23% carry share for for Cole McDonald, excuse me. And he had 7 total. And then Brandon Silvers had the 1 lone carry for a 1% carry share. So I'm bringing that up on the other page here. I just want to make sure that I'm not giving false information for the pass attempts. But getting down to the carries, getting down to running backs, we saw Max Borghi have 56% of snaps, 50% carry share. He had 15 total carries. He had 11% target share with 4 targets as well. And then Bryson Aline was the only other active running back last week. 35% of snaps, 23% of carries with 7 total carries, and 11% target share with 4 targets overall. He did get a little bit extra run in there for a little bit when Borghi left the game for a little bit with a knee injury, but he did return to the game ultimately. Just pulling this up real quick. I just want to make sure I have the pass attempts right for them. I'm not sure. That's not from last week. Okay, we're just going to skip over that for this point in time, but we'll move further down. So the wide receivers, we've seen pretty similar to what we saw in recent weeks. So Deontay Burnett led the way with 99% of snaps. He was out there all but 1 snap in week number 3. 17% target share, he had 6 targets and 1 touchdown. Javante Kirkland was the main other wide receiver once again, 80% of snaps. A little bit down for him there, but I don't know exactly why that was. Maybe they gave him some rest towards the end of the game, gave him a couple plays off here and there. 19% target share. He had 7 targets. He had 2 touchdowns in that game last week. And then after that, it got a little bit bogged down. Really, everybody else kind of split it up after there. Travell Harris led the way, the rest away in 56% of snaps, 11% target share on 4 targets. We had Nick Holley get 39% of snaps, which is a major decrease with him with Travell Harris back. So he had 8% target share. He had 3 targets total. Cedric Byrd and Ben Putnam both had 44% of snaps, 8% target share with 3 targets apiece. And then we got down to Justin Smith, 23% of snaps. He had 2 targets for a 6% target share. So still not super involved, although people have kind of been hyping him up across the industry. And then we had Aaron Nelson play his first actual offensive snap of the season. He had 1 snap in this game for a 1% of snaps and a 0% target share since he did not draw a target on that single snap. Then tight end Garrett Owens played 17% of snaps. He did not draw a single target once again, so he is still essentially useless from a DFS perspective. Moving down to the Orlando Guardians, we saw Paxton Lynch take 100% of pass attempts and 100% of snaps in week 3. We'll see whether that maintains moving forward. Obviously, they have DeAndre Francois, who has been the backup, but Lynch has been their most effective quarterback. They did sign Quentin Flowers this week as well. Kind of an undersized quarterback, was kind of converted to running back to try to make the NFL. Didn't really do it. Was in the XFL the last iteration as well. So he's a mobile quarterback. We'll see what he looks like at this point in time, but he could factor in some run packages. But I think it's still Paxton Lynch's job to lose at this point in time. When it comes down to the running back perspective, it was pretty even last week. We saw Jermaine Martin get 38% of snaps. Calvin Taylor got 40%. Both had a 28% carry share with 7 total carries, 7% target share on 2 targets for Jermaine Martin, and a 3% target share on 1 target for Calvin Taylor. As we move forward to week 4, Calvin Taylor has been released as Devin Darrington has been activated from the reserve list. So he's past his injury at this point in time. Could mean good things for Jermaine Martin this week, but he's still a little bit overpriced overall from a DFS perspective. But we'll just have to see how that all shakes out. Still a pretty pass-happy team at this point in time. When we get down to the wide receivers, they have quite a few of them. Obviously, once again, we have Charleston Rambo, who saw 81% of snaps, a 13% target share on 4 targets. Still really hasn't done anything. Sooner rather than later, I think they're going to get the memo that Charleston Rambo is not it. Cody Lattimore saw 75% of snaps, a 27% target share with 8 targets. He is still their main wide receiver. Even though everybody's listed him as tight end on DraftKings and on the depth chart, he is out there playing their X wide receiver position. Eli Rogers saw 70% of snaps at 13% target share on 4 targets. So you see kind of a lot of flatlining in terms of targets this past week. He's their main slot guy still once again. We saw Lance Lanier play 76% of snaps with a 13% target share with 4 targets. So he's been very involved so far in his first 2 weeks. It really hasn't amounted to too much DFS-wise, but if you want to take a chance on him this week as a GPP pay down option, would not blame you whatsoever. Otherwise, it might end up being week 5 by the time he kind of breaks off. But he does have that chemistry with Paxton Lynch since they played in the USFL together as well. Devonta Payton saw 40% of snaps. He had a 0% target share, and he was traded this week. He is on the Arlington Renegades now at this point in time. So not really anybody that you're going to play for DFS, at least for week 4. Dedrick Thomas saw 25% of snaps, a 13% target share with 4 targets, and he had 1 carry for a 4% carry share as well. I'm going to take a drink here real quick. So mainly when we're talking Orlando wide receivers, it's really just Cody Lattimore at this point in time. Lance Lanier, you can take some shots on. Eli Rogers, you could take some shots on. But that's pretty much what we're looking at. The tight ends. Logan Becker played 30% of snaps. He had 2 targets for a 7% target share. Logan Carter, excuse me. I think I said Logan Becker there. Ryan Becker, the tight end, played 5% of snaps. Didn't receive a single target in that time. And then Jalen Smith, who they recently signed to the team, came right in week 1, or his week 1 with this team, at least I should say. He had a 20% target share. He had a 20% snap share. He had a 3% target share. He had 1 target, which he caught for 28 yards. He could be a pretty athletic tight end in this offense. We'll see if his role grows as the season moves along. Could be somebody interesting in future weeks. Moving down to the San Antonio Browns, Jack Cohen started. He played 100% of snaps and had 100% of the pass attempts, and he looked very, very bad in that game, honestly. But Houston has one of the best defenses in the league. Kalen Ballage played 57% of snaps. He had 37% of the carries. He had 10 total carries. He had a 21% target share with 4 total targets. So these running backs were a little bit more involved out of the backfield. When they were under pressure, Jack Cohen needs to get the ball out quick. Jaquez Patrick He played 47 or 45% of snaps. He had 30% of the carries, 8 total carries, 1 touchdown though, which is a 9-yard touchdown. He had a 5% target share on 1 total target. John Hillman, the other running back, didn't play a single snap, didn't get a carry, didn't get a target, so we don't really need to talk about him. Although he did get the touchdown back in week 2, which was kind of annoying, more or less. When we move down to their wide receivers, TJ Vasher played 73% of snaps. He had a 16% target share, 3 total targets, and he did have a touchdown in that game too. I forgot to write that down. Jalen Tolliver, who battled a groin injury throughout the week, only played 7% of snaps. He didn't receive a single target in those 7% of snaps. So wasn't too involved for week number 3. Would not be surprised if that changes in week 4, since he's obviously one of their better wide receivers. The odd thing last week that we kind of saw flip. Darius Roberson Jr. was the main slot guy in week 2. He only played 25% of snaps in week 3, 5% target share. Him and Fred Brown swap kind of roles, and it was kind of the opposite of what we expected. And the week before that was kind of the opposite of what we expected. So these guys are going to be very interesting, I guess, moving forward, but you can only take shots on both of them. Fred Brown played 86% of snaps. He had 11% target share for 2 targets. And then Travis Johnson played mainly on the outside in place of Jalen Tolliver, 80% of snaps, 21% target share with 4 targets. So he looked a little bit better in week 3, but not too interested in this passing game at this point in time. Jalen Tolliver is still the main guy there. Vasher's pretty cheap, but he's dealing with his own injury at this point in time too, as well, as we'll mention as we get moving along. For the tight ends, Alize Mack played 77% of snaps. He had a 21% target share with 4 targets. And then Deion Yeller played only 36% of snaps. He had a 0% target share as he didn't receive a single target. And then Ben Beasy didn't play a single snap or receive a target. And he has since been cut as of like 2 days ago from this team, so he won't factor in moving forward. For the Seattle Sea Dragons, we saw Ben DiNucci play 100% of snaps and get 100% of pass attempts once again. Morgan Ellison led the backfield in week number 3, 63% of snaps, 68% of carries, 17 total. However, he didn't see a single target out of the backfield. He did get injured in this game as well, so he might have had an even bigger day, but he did run for over 100 yards, which he was actually the first XFL running back in this iteration to do that. TJ Hammonds played 16% of the snaps. He had 8% of carries with 2 total carries. He had a 14% target share with 5 total targets. He could factor in a little bit this week if Morgan Ellison is unable to go. They did bring in Darius Bradwell as well, who we'll talk a little bit about as we get moving along past the recap point. When we move down to the wide receiver portion, Jakir Pearson played 85% of the snaps. He had a 24% target share with 9 total targets, so he was very involved once again. Blake Jackson, 99% of snaps. He played all but 1 snap in this most recent game. 14% target share, 5 targets, 1 touchdown. So he's still pretty involved once again. Josh Gordon had the big game, 65% of snaps. So that wasn't really a big increase in snaps. He has 19% target share on 7 targets. He did catch 2 touchdowns. One was kind of a broken play that should never have happened, but it did happen and he got a touchdown on that. So big week there. Expect a lot of ownership to go to him this week since he did have that big week and he is kind of that name that people do know. Juwan Green saw an uptick in snaps with 56% of snaps. He had an 8% target share, and he did catch a touchdown on his lone target. He's a guy that I like quite a bit going into the XFL, but just really hasn't shown too much at this point in time. You're really cheap if you want to take a dart throw on him, but still a little risky at this point in time as well. Jordan Vesey played 72% of snaps. Once again, 14% target share. He had 5 total targets. And then we got Damian Willis, who played 35% of snaps, 8% target share out of him. He had 3 total targets. Still a little involved, but nothing that we want to chase. And then Kelvin McKnight played 7% of snaps. He didn't receive a single target. And then Charlie Tamoapo played 1% of snaps. He had a 0% target share, and he is currently banged up at this point in time as well. Moving down to the Battlehawks, AJ McCarron played 100% of snaps, 100% of pass attempts. Once again, no major changes, no major surprises there. Brian Hill had 76% of the snaps out of the backfield. He had 71% of the carries, 12 total carries. He had a 10% target share out of the backfield, 4 targets. He did catch a touchdown out of the backfield as well. And then Mateo Durant had 24% of the snaps, so him and Brian Hill split it. Kareem Walker didn't factor in at all. He didn't play a single snap. He didn't have a carry. He didn't have a target. And then 18% of the carries for Mateo Durant. He had 3 total carries, 5% target share for him. He did receive 2 targets in the game. Then their wide receiver room shaked out a little interesting, I guess. Once again, Darius Shepard played 75% of snaps. He had a 20% target share. He actually drew 8 targets in this game, which is a pretty good uptick for him. He's been a guy that's been out there a ton for them, but really hasn't produced much at all. Hakeem Butler played 68% of the snaps. He had a 32.5% target share. He saw 13 total targets in this game and a touchdown. He's kind of been their main guy at wide receiver, especially when it comes to getting touchdowns. I think he has one touchdown every single week so far this year, too. Marcel Aitman played 37% of snaps. He had a 7.5% target share with 3 targets, but he has since been placed on the reserve list. He's been dealing with like a hamstring injury, I do believe. Austin Proel, 74% of snaps, only a 7.5% target share, a little bit down for him. He only had 3 targets this past week. Stephen Mitchell, who was a guy that I kind of highlighted as a dart throw last week, cheaper guy, looked pretty good in week 2, which was his very first week. 53% of snaps, 10% target share. He had 4 targets and he did catch 1 touchdown. And then we had Gary Jennings, who played 21% of snaps, did not see a single target. For their tight ends, they just had the 2 last week. Jake Sutherland played 47% of snaps. He had a 2.5% target share. He had the 1 target, which he caught for a touchdown. So I kind of mentioned it with him before, like, you're probably going to get a little bit of production here and there, but you never know when it's going to come. Giovanni Haskins, the other tight end, 26% of snaps, a 5% target share. He did have 2 targets in this game as well. I had to correct that as well. Then we move down to the Vipers, who had Brett Hundley, who played 100% of snaps, 100% of pass attempts. He had 27% carry rate as well, 8 total carries, and he did have a rushing touchdown. You know, he played reasonably well in this game, especially well from a DFS perspective as well. He was out there. He was running the ball. He looked pretty good there. He is dealing with a little bit of thigh injury, so just keep that in mind this week, but looks like a pretty good option moving forward. And then for the running backs, Rod Smith played 31% of snaps. He had 33% of the carries. He had 10 total carries. He had 1 target out of the backfield for a 4% target share. Then we had John Lovett, 26% of snaps. He had 5 total carries for a 17% carry share. He had 2 targets out of the backfield for an 8% target share. And then he did have a long catch and run for a touchdown as well. DeAndre Torrey, the 3rd running back, 19% of snaps, 17% carry share. He had 5 total carries, and he didn't receive a target out of the backfield, which is kind of interesting for him at this point in time. He's kind of coming into the league being known as this receiving back, and he really hasn't been used in that role at all. Obviously, last week we were looking at wide receivers, and we didn't really know who Brett Hundley was going to favor going back to his Green Bay time. We knew that he kind of liked the slot, and then whoever he thought was his wide receiver 1, he wasn't afraid to dump off to running backs, and it looks like that trend's kind of continued at this point in time. Jeff Badette, 74% of snaps, primarily playing out of the slot. Once again, 31% target share, 8 targets, 1 touchdown. He did have 1 carry too as well. Didn't really do too much with it, obviously. Martavius Bryant, 76% of snaps. He had an 8% target share and only had 2 targets in this game. So maybe Martavius Bryant's the one that we do fade this week if you're going to do Vegas wide receivers in general. Then Geronimo Allison, 85% of snaps, a 15% target share with 4 targets. Obviously, he had a little bit of built-in chemistry with Brett Hundley from their times in Green Bay. So maybe that's the guy that he leans on as kind of his wide receiver 1, you know, on the outside at least, because Jeff Badette kind of playing out of that slot kind of has had a very good role in this offense. And that's an area that Brett Hundley likes to target once again. Then we had Sneak Sweeting play 41% of the snaps. He had a 15% target share with 4 targets. And then he had 1 carry out of the backfield. So he's been pretty involved as well as kind of their gadget player. Matthew Sexton played 34% of snaps. He had a 15% target share with 4 targets. Just kind of the problem here is they've been moving these wide receivers around. They've been using, 5 of them during the games and decent target share for most of them. Jeff Badette's kind of led the way, though, throughout the season so far. Then we move down to the tight ends. Brandon Dillon played 24% of snaps. He didn't have a single target. Cam Sutton had 37% of the snaps. He had 1 target for a 4% target share. Sean Price, 26% of snaps, no targets. And then Travis Kuntz, 21% of snaps and 0 targets as well. So that's kind of the quick little recap in terms of snaps, in terms of target shares for each 8 teams from week 3. Hopefully you guys found that useful. If you are more interested in that, the spreadsheet that I have, these notes, it's up over on my Patreon, patreon.com/CoachCraigSports once again. But with that being said, going to exit out of here. We're going to go over to my week 4 sheet and share that page at this point in time. We'll talk through each team, talk through some of the pricing, and then kind of my thoughts on each play or player, I should say, as well. So I got my sheet up here. It's easier for me to do this than go over DraftKings. If you guys prefer the DraftKings view, be sure to let me know. But when we're talking about the Renegades, we have Kyle Slaughter, he's $7,900. You can play him in GPPs if you want to do so. They go against St. Louis this week. There's a little bit of a revenge narrative there for like Jay Hayes, Jonathan Hayes, and Chuck Long, since they were kind of the coaches' staff for the Battlehawks the last time around. But maybe Slaughter's better in week 2, but he just really didn't impress. This offense has kind of been a mess, so I'm not too interested in that from that. Kenneth Farrow, the running back, he's not listed on DraftKings. Obviously, came to the team last week, so hopefully next week they'll have him up on DraftKings. Adrian Killens is $3,100. Really not involved. Davion Smith, $7,300. I would consider him a cash game play because he's been involved out of the backfield. He's got a pretty safe carry percentage as well, so he's going to be out there more times than not. He's probably got one of the safer workloads in the XFL at this point in time. Brandon Arcanado at $5,100. Not too interested in, honestly. Caleb Van Ness, you could take like a shot on a pay down option just in GPP since he's $3,000 flat minimum, but still not too interested in him at the same time. Sean Monster didn't play last week. Smallwood's been useless. Winningham had the 1 touchdown in like week 2, but hasn't done anything otherwise. Tyler Vaughns is the main guy here in terms of the wide receivers. He's more of a GPP option for me at this point in time. But the decrease in snap rates are a little bit concerning, but hopefully that bounces back this week. Javante Payton just recently joined the team, so I don't expect him to be active either way. Nate Becker, Sean Byer, we're not interested in. And then Sal Cannell, you can play in cash if you want to. You can play in GPPs. Obviously, he does have that familiarity with Kyle Slaughter. What I did a lot last week is the lineups, because I expected Kyle Slaughter to be popular. The lineups I played Slaughter, I tried to stack him with Tyler Vaughns or Lawan Winningham. And then the lineups I didn't have Kyle Slaughter's where I played Sal Cannella more, because I assumed that people would stack Slaughter and Cannella together a ton. And I think that was a lot of the case too. Unfortunately, neither one of those guys ended up being worth a crap last week. So that is something to consider as well. Renegades defense going against St. Louis. I'm not super interested there. They are the most expensive defense once again too at $5,000. We move down to the defenders. If you really want to play Jordan Ta'amu, you could do it in a GPP setting, but not anything I'm particularly chasing this week. We get down to Abram Smith. You can play him in GPPs. Raquel Armstead, you could use his GPP paydown. The biggest thing with him is he's not being used out of the backfield. So, yeah, he's a little bit cheaper running back, but without that receiving upside, that's really capping him overall. Artavius Pierce, he hasn't been active so far this season, so we're not too worried about him. And then we get down to these wide receivers. Chris Blair, you could play in GPPs at $4,500. Josh Hammond at $66, too expensive for me for what he's done so far this season. We don't need to really talk about Jaquiz Zard at $5,100 because he's literally done nothing. Brandon Smith, he's not on DraftKings yet for whatever reason. Lucky Jackson, you could play in GPPs at $4,700. He was limited, I believe, yesterday due to a hamstring injury, but I believe he was a little bit banged up in recent weeks as well. So we'll see if that impacts him. We'll just have to keep a status out that the week throughout as well. If anything does change with his status, I'll leave it down in the comments. Josh Malone wasn't very involved, even though he is the flat minimum. Then we get down to the tight ends. I'm taking the GPP tag off of Ian Wolf, who is out supposedly this week due to knee and ankle injuries, and then Burley Moore is supposedly out due to an ankle injury as well. So they are missing their top 2 tight ends at this point in time. We saw Trey Barriere only play 10% of snaps last week. They traded for Alex Ellis from the Arlington Renegades. So we'll see how they use those tight ends moving forward. But I wouldn't be surprised if they use more wide receiver sets. Maybe they go to a more pass-happy attack this week. And that could be pretty interesting since they've been one of the run-heaviest teams in the league. We would get down to their defense. Not really too interesting in them against Vegas. I think Vegas has a chance to put some points up on the board this week. For the Roughnecks, I'm not really chasing Cole McDonald at this point in time. He's just not playing enough and hasn't really, you just need a 2-touchdown game out of him rushing wise. And the odds of that are just not very high at this point in time. Brandon Silvers, I think you can play in cash. He is the cheapest cash game quarterback, in my opinion, this week at $9,700. So keep that in mind. Bryce Aline, GPP paydown option at $3,400. If Max Borgi is unable to go, he could be very chalky, could be a cash game option as well. Same thing could be said with Dewan Lee at that point in time, but Lee was inactive for week number 3. Max Borgi is a GPP option. Obviously, he's got decent volume, but he didn't practice on Tuesday, was limited on Wednesday due to his knee issue, so we just need to monitor that moving forward. We get down to these wide receivers. Not too interested in Nick Holley this week with the decreased snap count, but Dante Burnett, GPP option at $9,300. He's got a pretty safe role out there. He's out there more times than not. I think Javante Kirkland, you can play in cash at $8,900. He's been relatively safe so far this season. Travell Harris at $5,300. You can take a chance in GPP since the snaps were back up since he returned. And then, like all the other guys, pretty much just dart throws at that point in time. The Houston Roughnecks defense going against Orlando. I don't know why I didn't write this down before, but they are definitely a cash game defense this week. I believe there's 2 defenses in general that I would consider cash game plays, and they are the more expensive option, but they could definitely be worth it since they are one of the better defenses, and Orlando has struggled quite a bit so far this season. Paxton Lynch, if you really want to throw him out in a GPP, you could do it. Obviously, we talked about Quentin Flowers being signed by the team. He's not on DraftKings, but he could factor in some run packages. Not sure how quickly he'll catch up on the offense. Jermaine Martin, $7,200. Could see a bump in production this week, with no Kelvin Taylor, but Devin Darrington's coming back off the reserve list. Darrington's not listed on DraftKings, and Kelvin Taylor obviously was cut this week. For their wide receivers, Dan Williams was inactive the first week with the team. Don't expect him to be too involved. Andrew Jamil was also inactive last week. Don't expect him to be too involved. Cody Latimer, cash game play at $5,600. Still like him quite a bit. He has been out there the most out of their wide receivers, besides Charles Rambo, who literally does nothing. And he's had the most production week to week as well. Charles Rambo, not interested in it, especially at $7,300. Eli Rogers, Lance Lenore, if you want to use them as GPP paydown options, cash fillers, you could try to do that as well. Probably not going to use them as cash fillers, maybe just the GPP paydown option. And I'm going to put the GPP paydown option tag. Oops, did that too crazy there. I'm going to do the pay down option tag on Eli Rogers as well. Tight end's not super interested in there. Jalen Carter could be, or Jalen Smith could be interesting moving forward, but not really interested in them this week. Their defense, just not good. They're going against Houston this week, so we don't really want to test that. Moving down to San Antonio, Jack Cohen, $8,200. Coming off a very, very poor performance. I'm not super interested in him this week, honestly. Kalen Balaj, $8,100. Jaquez Patrick, $5,200. I'm personally playing Patrick more than Balaj, but you could play both in GPPs. Their wide receiver core is kind of a mess at this point in time. Fred Brown and Roberson have kind of shared slots alternating weeks for whatever reason. So if you want to play one of them, I guess you could. Travis Johnson played a little bit more on the outside last week. Looked all right. $3,400. Tolliver, if we get the news that he's healthy and he practiced in full, I believe it was yesterday due to his groin injury. I have some interest in him in GPPs. TJ Vasher, he's a pay down option if he plays, but he hasn't yet to practice this week due to his shoulder injury. Travis Tovian signed with the team. He was inactive last week. And then they did sign Emmanuel Butler, who's not on DraftKings. He's a big, 6'4" wide receiver out of Northern Arizona a few years back. Ben BC was cut this week. We got Alize Mack and Deion Yelder. If you really want to play one, it looks like Mack's a GPP option. But, don't sleep on Yelder, too. He's pretty good. For their defense, they're going against Seattle this week. Not super interested in there, even though Ben DiNucci's had some turnover problems so far this season. Then we get down to Seattle. I consider Ben DiNucci a cash game play this week. He's $10,800. So he's a lot more expensive than Brandon Silvers, although both have pretty good passing volume. But at the same time, if Morgan Ellison doesn't play this week at running back, they don't have much there. He's $6,900. If he plays, you can obviously play him. But he didn't practice on Tuesday. He was limited on Wednesday due to knee injury. And then we have TJ Hammonds behind him at $3,300, kind of a pay down option if you want to go there. If Ellison doesn't play, he could be pretty involved in this team overall. And he had some pretty good target share in week number 3. They signed Darius Bradwell, who is a former Chargers practice squad running back. Could have some upside in this offense, but he is not on DraftKings, so we can't play him for DFS this week. Josh Gordon, I consider purely as GPP play at this point in time at $10,600. I'm not really personally chasing last week. He could do it once again, but I think he's going to be a little bit too popular overall. Jawan Green, we're kind of skipping this week, but if you wanted to mix them into GPP, you could. Blake Jackson, Jakur Pearson, $7,500, $10,300. I think both are cash game options. They're both kind of playing the slot for this team. Kelvin McKnight is not anybody we want to play. McLean Mannix is also on the team, but he was inactive last week now. Jordan Vesey, you could play in GPPs for $4,200, especially if this passing volume goes up. Damon Willis, not too interested. And then Charlie Moapo, he didn't practice Tuesday, was limited on Wednesday due to a calf injury. He is a $3,000 running back, even though he's a tight end, and he's not playing enough to consider. Seattle Sea Dragons defense against San Antonio, these should be a GPP option as well. The Seattle's defense is all right. San Antonio is not the greatest team offensively in the world, especially if they can get after the quarterback and that offensive line once again. Taking a little break here. I'm going to get some water. And then we'll get over to the St. Louis Battlehawks. So AJ McCarron, $10,700, second most expensive quarterback on the slate. He's a GPP option for me this week once again. In terms of the running backs, mainly just Brian Hill. He's a cash game option at $6,600. Lion's share of the backfield here. He's been limited on Wednesday due to a hamstring injury, but he's kind of been dealing with that for a while. Don't expect that to impact him too much. They did sign Puka Williams after DC cut him. He's $3,000. Probably not going to be active this week, so I'm not going to talk too much about him, but could be somebody in the future. Marcel Aitman was placed on the reserve list with his injury, so not interested in him. Hakeem Butler is a cash game option for me this week. He's $8,300. He scored a touchdown every single week. Can't really expect that to, continue, but played a pretty big role for them in this offense. He was limited on Wednesday due to a hamstring injury, so we'll continue to monitor that. George Campbell, inactive in week 3, not interested in him. Gary Jennings hasn't done anything, not interested in him. Steven Mitchell, GPP option for me, but he was limited on Wednesday due to a quad injury. $4,300. Kind of a dart throw almost at that price tag. Liked him a little bit better last week when he was a little bit cheaper. Austin Proel, $6,000 GPP option. Didn't really pan out last week, but wouldn't be surprised if it does this week. And then Darius Shepard, you could probably roll on GPPs if you really want to as well, but a little too expensive for me at $6,900 for the production we're getting out of him. They also signed Chan Hansen, the wide receiver, former Jets, Texans wide receiver, who was with DC early on in the season. Some weird things happened there, and he got cut. But he was signed this week. Don't expect him to be active this week, though. The tight end's not too interested in overall. You're just hoping for a touchdown out of them. And the Battlehawks defense, I do consider them a cash game option this week. They are a pretty decent defense. They're going against Arlington, who's kind of been lost in terms of play calling offensively. So they are the cheaper of the two cash game defenses, just depending on how you're doing your build this week overall, but I would consider them. Then last but not least, our last cash game quarterback, Brett Hundley, $10,000. He was limited both days so far this week due to a thigh injury, so the Wednesday and Thursday. Keep an eye on that, but do think he's quite interesting once again. John Lovett, $4,900, would be the running back I consider playing if I'm playing any of them in a GPP, just with his involvement out of the backfield. Probably the most talented running back they have out of the three as well. Geronimo Allison, GPP option, mainly just the familiarity with Brett Hundley. I don't think Allison's that great a wide receiver anyways, but if he gets some volume, he could be interesting. Jeff Badet, $9,700 GPP option. I like the upside that he does present. He's playing out of the slot, which Hundley does like as well, but not really a cash game play at his price tag. But I do like the upside that he does offer. Martavius Brown, I'm trying to stay away from this week. Matthew Sexton, Sneak Sweeting, they're in that price range where you could consider them GPP paydown options. And then their tight ends, just not interested in. If you want to play the Vipers defense versus DC this week in a GPP, you can definitely go ahead and do that. But that's kind of the rundown in terms of what I have for this week, whether I play guys in cash, GPP paydown, try to avoid them whatsoever too. If you guys have any more specific questions related to XFL DFS for week 4, keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that I am recording this video on Thursday as opposed to Friday like I do most weeks, but there could be things that change, especially from an injury perspective, moving forward from today and tomorrow. But I'll try to update that all down in the comments as well. Try to get all the inactives down there as well, like I did last week, so you guys have all that information available to you as well. But with that being said, we're going to get off of here. I'll go over DraftKings. Let's just build like a cash game line real quick. So let me get DraftKings brought up here real quick. We're going to share this. So once again, at the quarterback position, when I'm building a cash game lineup, you have a couple options. You got Ben DiNucci, $10,800, Brett Hundley, $10,000, or Brandon Silvers, $9,700. More often than not, I'm probably going to go Brandon Silvers just because he's the cheapest of the three. But I understand going to Brett Hundley because he has the rushing upside, so he's a little bit safer floor there as well. And then Ben DiNucci, the passing volume is hard to deny at this point in time, especially with the way their running backs are kind of collapsing, especially if Morgan Ellison cannot play this week. So I'm going to put Brandon Silvers in when I'm first doing that. Not even going to think twice. Going to put Javante Kirkland in there at $8,900. When we go back to our running backs, the cash game running backs that I like this week, Davion Smith, Brian Hill. I think I'm going to put Brian Hill in at this point in time. He's just the cheaper option of the two. And then for the defenses, we can play the Roughnecks defense or we can play the Battlehawks defense. We'll put the Roughnecks defense in to start. And then if we need to clear up some money to play down to the Battlehawks defense, we can definitely do that as well. When we're talking about wide receivers, I still think Ja'Cory Pearson is probably the safest wide receiver in XFL DFS at this point in time. Going against San Antonio, I'm not in love with the San Antonio corners, especially, they're going to have to play like 3 or 4 corners at the time, like all the time against Seattle. So Pearson operating in the slot and Blake Jackson operating out of the slot, they can definitely stretch them that way as well. We got $4,800 essentially remaining per player. So it gets a little bit tighter here at this point in time. Going back through here, I'm going back over to my other sheet. I just want to take a look at who I kind of had listed as my cash game plays. Just because going through it, it's a little bit harder to remember as you're talking through it and everything else like that. Cody Lattimore was one that I definitely did like. So we're going to put him in here for $5,600. We have $4,100 remaining. So this is kind of where you're going to get into the tougher spots, but it just depends on a lot of news that probably comes out throughout the week as well. Obviously, we see that the pricing is been going up for a lot of these guys, especially the guys that have produced so far at times this year, or for the most part this year. Maybe if you want to kind of balance out your lineup a little bit, you can go from Pearson down to like Hakeem Butler, but there is some injury risk there this week as well. You'll see even with Brandon Silvers being the cheaper quarterback. So maybe this is a week where you play the Battlehawks defense over the Roughnecks defense as well. Let's see who makes the most sense here. TJ Vasher would be like an interesting play if he wasn't hurt as well. That would fit in this price tag. Let's go off of the Roughnecks defense. Let's go over the Battlehawks defense real quick. And then obviously that gives us a little bit more flexibility and room to pay up a little bit here at this last spot. So I think when we're talking about this cash game build, probably the two most interesting options here are going to be Lucky Jackson and Tyler Vaughns. Both have had decent target shares throughout the season for their offense. I think both are viable in this spot. If you want to go with a different option in this range as well, that definitely makes some sense too as well. We could go Jordan Vesey, who's kind of had a decent role in his offense, and then we're $100 short of that Battlehawks that Roughnecks defense. But at the same time, you could take Brandon Silvers out. You could go up to like a Brett Hundley there as well. So that's one way to do it. Just kind of talking through some theory as I'm talking through it. This week, when I'm looking at quarterbacks, probably going to play a decent amount of Ben DiNucci. I like the passing volume that he has. You're going to try to stack him a decent amount with Ja'Cory Pearson. You're going to stack him a decent amount with Blake Jackson. Probably going to be over the field on Pearson again. Going to be under the field on Josh Gordon. Going to be probably over the field eventually on Jordan Vesey. Maybe a little bit over the field on TJ Hammonds, just depending on how that situation shakes out too, is him being a pay down option. When we're talking about AJ McCarron, if I'm playing him, I want to play him with Hakeem Butler if he ends up playing. I have some interest with him and Austin Proel, and then probably Stephen Mitchell Jr. as well. I don't mind putting him and Brian Hill together. Just being said, these are GPP as we're kind of talking here. Brett Hundley, if I'm playing him, I'm pretty much playing him. I think you can still play him naked because he has the rushing upside as long as the thigh injury isn't anything major. And then if I'm playing him, you want him and Jeff Badette together. You want him, Toronto and Allison in a couple lines probably too as well. Maybe you mix them in with like a Sneak Sweeting or like a Matthew Sexton too, but I don't think you have to do that, but it is a way to save some money as well. And then we get down to, let's see. So we have Brett Hundley. Brandon Silvers, I will play this week again, $9,700. I'll play him with I'll play him with Burnett. I'll play him with Kirkland. I'll play him with Travell Harris. You can play him with Max Borghi. You can play him with Bryson Aline if Max Borghi's out as well. So if Borghi's out, going back to that lineup that we had before for cash, I think Bryson Aline's probably your last cash game play there, and then you pay up for the Houston Roughnecks defense. You could also pay up from Brandon Silvers as well. So that is something to note there, just as we're talking through it. But excuse me. So I'm trying to find my pace here. So Jordan Ta'amu probably going to stay away from this week. Paxton Lynch probably going to stay away from this week. Jack Cohn, I'm staying away from this week. Kyle Slaughter staying away from this week. So that's pretty much where we're at in terms of quarterbacks. I'll probably play a lot of Ben DiNucci, probably play a lot of Brandon Silvers, probably play a lot of Brett Hundley, and then play a little bit of like AJ McCarron. So trying to stick tight to 3-4 quarterbacks at this point in time. And I think those are the three that are worth playing as well. Running back position. Max Borghi, if he's healthy, I think you can definitely play him once again. I would err on the side of caution, maybe a little bit under the weight on the field. Abram Smith, there's a little bit of interest there, but he's a little bit expensive. I think there's better options this week at running back too as well. Kalen Ballage, I'll have a little bit. Davion Smith, I'll probably have a ton of once again. Jermaine Martin, maybe just a little bit. Morgan Ellison, obviously, depends on if he plays. But for the most part, I'm getting a lot of Davion Smith. I'm getting a lot of Brian Hill. I expect them to both be pretty chalky, though, if I'm being completely honest. As we move down here, Jaquez Patrick, I'll get a little bit of. John Lovett, I might get a little bit of. Bryson Aline will be very interesting. TJ Hammonds as well. Maybe you throw in like a little bit of Nick Howley here and there, but the snap counts last week make it a little bit tougher too as well. Don't want to overreact too much to 1 week, but it's a little bit tougher as well. So wide receivers, underweight to the field on Josh Gordon, probably be overweight on Pearson once again. Probably try to be a little bit overweight to the field on Jeff Badet as well. Burnett probably be right in line in terms of ownership. Kirkland probably be a little bit overweight. Butler probably try to be right in line. Geronimo Allison, I'll probably be right in line with the field or just a little bit underweight to the field. It kind of depends on where the projected ownership ends up. Sal Cannell, probably a little bit, I'll say either even with the field or underweight to the field. I'll probably be a little bit less on Cannell this week. So he'll probably have a decent size week. Blake Jackson, probably right in line with the field. Martavius Bryant, Charleston Rambo, Darius Shepard, not super interested in those guys. Josh Hammond, Jordan Smallwood, the same. Tolliver, I'll take my shots on if he's healthy, if he practices in full once again today. I'll fire away at him, honestly, because he's going to have a big week one of these weeks. Seattle is not a defense that I'm too afraid of from that perspective. Austin Prohl, I'll have a little bit of. Cody Lattimore, probably be overweight to the field. Travell Harris, probably overweight to the field on. Lucky Jackson, probably in line with the field. Tyler Vaughn's maybe slightly overweight to the field. The snap rates ticking down are a little bit of a concern for me overall. Stephen Mitchell probably be overweight to the field once again this week since, there is some upside there, especially depending on how that St. Louis wide receiver room shakes out if Hakeem Butler doesn't play as well. Jordan VC, I'll be overweight to the field. I know that much already. TJ Vasher, if he plays, probably in line with the field. If he doesn't play, Travis Johnson could be a sneaky play as well. Let's see what else we got here. Eli Rogers probably be in line with the field. Lance Lenoir probably a little bit overweight than the field, honestly, at this point in time as well. So let's see who else is here that could potentially be. Caleb Van Den Esch, maybe I'll take a couple shots here and there. Haven't really decided how many lineups I'm playing personally, but probably be 20 Maxon once again. In terms of the defenses, I don't really want the Arlington defense that much against St. Louis. Honestly, they're too expensive at this point in time. Roughnecks defense do like quite a bit against Orlando. Expect them to be very, very chalky though. The defenders versus Vegas, probably staying away from. Battlehawks, I will have quite a few shares of against Arlington as well. So mainly Roughnecks, Arlington. I'll play the Seattle a little bit against San Antonio. I'll play a little bit of Vipers against DC. And then that's probably it. I'm trying to keep it to 3 to 4 defenses that I would play, but Roughnecks, Battlehawks be the main 2. Sea Dragons and Vipers I'll have a little bit of exposure to as well. But that's pretty much what I do have in terms of XFL DFS for week number 4. Do appreciate everybody that did take the time out of their day to kind of listen to this, kind of listen to me ramble through a lot of this information as well. Hopefully you found something in here useful, whether it's the snap counts, the target shares, me talking through some price points, where I would play some guys. If you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. If there's anything else I can do for you, can always reach out on Twitter at CoachCraigSport as well. If there's any XFL prize picks that look pretty decent, I'll have them posted up over there. Probably throw it down in the comments as well. Haven't really got a chance to look at that at this point in time. Not sure if they're up yet or not. But week number 1 did pretty well in that. A couple weeks since then, I haven't been too comfortable with some of the lines. So I try to err on the side of caution, but do like doing the prize picks angle as well. And then last but not least, just have to throw it out there at this point in time. If you're still listening, promo code coach over at runthesims.com, you'll save 10%. It helps you out a little bit with using one of the best simulators in the industry. If you're somebody that likes using those target shares that I do mention, you want to plug them in, the DYI is for you. You can go over there, plug in the carry rates, plug in the target share, dink and dunk from there. But if you just want to use their projections as well, you can use their classic optimizer, build some groups over there. Say you want to play these wide receivers with these quarterbacks, you want to have these guys together, these guys not together, you can definitely do that as well. And if you use that code coach once again over at runthesims.com, you'll save 10%. But with that being said, that's really what I have for today at this point in time. If you're brand new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. Helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your XFL DFS at this point in time, helping you with your NBA DFS at this point in time, talking a little prize picks. A lot of that goes up over on my Twitter at Coach Craig Sports, so definitely be sure to check that out as well. And then I also have those And then I also have some NFL draft prospect interviews. There's about 3 up on the channel at this point in time. Go over there, check out their playlist. If you want to hear a little bit about some of their journeys, definitely be sure to check that out. And we'll be having some more come up in the near future as well. But with that being said, that's really all I have for today's video, for today's live stream. Once again, do truly appreciate everybody that did take the time out of their day to tune into this, whether you're watching live or on replay. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope that each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.